Her daughters received anonymous gifts until she saw the billionaire ex delivering one. She caught him at 6:47 a.m., kneeling on her porch like a thief, placing another silver-wrapped gift at her daughter's feet. The billionaire who'd told her to handle it when she got pregnant 5 years ago. The man she'd been running from ever since. But he wasn't there to take her children. He was there because he'd been leaving those gifts every month for 5 years, too terrified to knock, too broken to stay away. And when her 5-year-old daughter opened the door and saw him for the first time, she whispered one word that shattered everything. Rachel thought she knew. Daddy? The email arrived at 7:42 on a Thursday morning. Rachel Starnes was elbow-deep in oatmeal negotiations with Betty when her phone buzzed against the countertop. Maria was building a tower out of cereal boxes that would collapse any second. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and strawberry jam. Normal, safe. Theirs. She almost didn't look, but the subject line caught her eye. Wedding invitation. Your daughters have been selected. Rachel's stomach dropped. She wiped her hands on a dishcloth, clicked open the message, and read the first line 3 times before her brain would accept what her eyes were seeing. Dear Miss Starnes, we are delighted to inform you that Betty and Maria have been selected as flower girls for the upcoming wedding of Mr. Daniel Hardin and Miss Amanda Bianco. The phone slipped from her hand. It clattered onto the tile floor screen down, still glowing. Mommy? Betty's voice was small, worried. Rachel couldn't answer. She couldn't breathe. Daniel Hardin. The name she hadn't spoken aloud in 5 years. The man who'd looked at her ultrasound photo and said, handle it. I have a board meeting. The billionaire CEO who chose empire over them every single time. And now, he wanted her daughters at his wedding. But here's what you need to understand and pay close attention, because this matters. Sometimes the people we run from aren't the villains we think they are. Sometimes we're running from our own fear. If you've ever left someone because you were too terrified they'd reject you first, you understand what Rachel was about to discover. This story isn't just about her. It's about every woman who's ever protected her heart by running. If that's you, hit that subscribe button right now, because this community, we see you. And you're going to want to know how this ends. 5 years earlier, Rachel had loved him once. Not the version the world saw, the cold, calculating tech mogul who built Hardin Enterprises from nothing and crushed competitors like they were inconvenient insects. She'd loved the Daniel who worked late in his office, tie loosened, running his hands through his hair when the numbers didn't add up. The Daniel who remembered she hated cilantro. The Daniel who kissed her forehead when he thought she was asleep. But that Daniel had vanished the moment she'd whispered, I'm pregnant. His face had gone blank. Smooth, corporate, like she'd just pitched a failing product. You're sure? Yes. When? 6 months. Maybe 7. Handle it, Rachel. I can't have distractions right now. Not we'll figure this out. Not are you okay? Handle it. Like she was a problem. Like their baby was a glitch in his operating system that needed debugging. She'd left that night, packed 1 suitcase, emptied half her savings account, and disappeared into the kind of small-town anonymity billionaires never bothered searching. Willow Bend, population 4,200, where nobody cared about tech empires or penthouse scandals, where she could raise her daughters in peace. And she had, for 5 beautiful, quiet years, until this email ripped the past wide open. Rachel bent down, picked up her phone with shaking hands, and kept reading. The ceremony will take place at the Hardin estate on June 14th. We understand this is short notice. But Mr. Hardin personally requested your daughters for this honor. Travel and accommodations will be provided. Please confirm your attendance by May 30th. Personally requested. Her vision blurred. Why would he do this? He didn't even know Betty and Maria existed. She'd made sure of that. Changed her phone number. Moved states. Avoided mutual friends. She'd built a fortress of silence around their little family, and somehow he'd found them anyway. Mommy, you're crying, Maria said softly. Rachel touched her cheek, wet. She forced a smile, crouched down between her daughters, and pulled them close. They smelled like syrup and shampoo. Innocent. Untouched by the man who'd shattered her. I'm okay, babies. Mommy just got surprised by something. Good surprise or bad surprise? Betty asked, tilting her head exactly the way Daniel used to when he was thinking. Rachel's throat tightened. How do I answer that? Before she could decide, the doorbell rang. The letter. Rachel opened the door to find a cream-colored envelope propped against the welcome mat. No delivery truck. No courier. Just the envelope, thick, expensive paper, her name written in elegant calligraphy across the front. She knelt, picked it up, and felt her pulse hammering in her ears. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting made her knees weak. Rachel, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But I need you to understand I didn't know. I swear on everything I am, I didn't know you were pregnant when you left. I've spent 5 years looking for you. Hiring investigators. Calling old friends. Checking hospital records. I thought you'd disappeared because I'd failed you. And I had. But not in the way I believed. 2 months ago, someone sent me a photo, Betty and Maria, at the park. I knew the moment I saw them. Their eyes, their smiles, the way Betty frowns when she's concentrating. They're mine, aren't they? Please come to the wedding. Not for me. For them. Let me see them. Let me try to explain. Let me prove I'm not the man who broke your heart. I'll wait as long as it takes. Daniel. Rachel's hands trembled so violently, the letter slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the ground. He knew. He'd known for 2 months and hadn't confronted her, hadn't demanded a paternity test, hadn't sent lawyers or threats. He'd sent an invitation. And then it hit her, the gifts. The silver paper and navy ribbon packages that had been arriving for weeks, always addressed to Betty and Maria, always unsigned. The hand-carved music box. The sketchbooks. The necklaces with their birthstones. It was him. Daniel had been leaving gifts for his daughters like some kind of ghost, too afraid to knock, too desperate to stay away. Mommy? Betty tugged her sleeve. Who's the letter from? Rachel looked down at her daughter, her brilliant, beautiful, dark amber-eyed daughter who deserved a father, even if that father had once been too broken to know what he was losing. And she realized something that terrified her more than anything else. She was going to have to let him back in. What Rachel didn't know, 300 miles away, in a glass-walled office overlooking the city, Daniel Hardin sat at his desk, staring at a framed photograph he kept hidden in his drawer. Rachel, laughing, sunlight in her hair. Taken 4 years ago, back when she still looked at him like he was more than his net worth. His assistant, Ellis Sanders, knocked twice and entered without waiting. She hasn't responded yet, Ellis said quietly. Daniel didn't look up. She won't. Then why go through with the wedding? Because if she thinks I'm moving on, maybe she'll feel safe enough to show up, just to see that I'm out of her life for good. Ellis frowned. You're using your own wedding as bait? I'm using my own wedding as proof, Daniel corrected. Proof that I'm not the man who told her to handle it. Proof that I've changed. Proof that I would burn this entire empire to the ground if it meant one more chance to be their father. And Amanda knows this? Daniel finally met his assistant's eyes. Amanda suggested it. Ellis went very still. You're not in love with her. No. But she understands what it's like to lose someone. You can't get back. And she's willing to help me try. This is insane. I know. Daniel closed the drawer, shutting Rachel's photo back into darkness. But if there's even a 1% chance she brings my daughters to that wedding, I'll play whatever role I have to, even if it means standing at an altar pretending to marry someone else. He paused. Because the only woman I've ever wanted to marry left me 5 years ago. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving she was right to leave and wrong to stay gone. Rachel stood in the hallway long after Betty and Maria had run back to their cereal towers. Daniel's letter crumpled in her fist. The handwriting. She'd know it anywhere, the careful slant of his capital letters, the way his R's curled at the bottom like they were holding secrets. She'd watched him sign contracts, scribble notes on whiteboards, write her name on coffee cups when they'd still been them. But it wasn't the letter that made her hands shake. It was what the letter confirmed. The gifts had been him all along. Rachel walked to the hall closet and pulled down the cardboard box she'd hidden on the top shelf. The one she told herself she kept just in case. The one she'd never shown the girls because she didn't know how to explain why a stranger loved them from a distance. She sat on the living room floor, opened the box, and let 5 years of anonymous affection spill across the carpet. For almost 2 years, gifts had been arriving once a month. 24 gifts total, one for each girl every month since Betty's 4th birthday. She'd counted them once, late at night when sleep wouldn't come and questions consumed her. Each one wrapped in silver paper, navy ribbon, no card. Just a small tag in that same careful handwriting. For Betty. From someone who cares. For Maria. From someone who cares. Now here's what most people miss, and you're going to want to pay attention to this next part. Sometimes love doesn't look like grand gestures. Sometimes it looks like quiet consistency, like showing up in the only way you know how, even when you're terrified. Remember this detail because it matters later when everything falls apart. Rachel picked up the first gift she'd ever received. A hand-carved wooden music box with a tiny ballerina frozen mid-spin. She wound the key. The melody was soft, haunting. Claire de Lune, Betty's favorite, though Rachel had never told anyone that. How did he know? She set it aside and reached for the next. 2 sketchbooks bound in leather, the pages thick as velvet. One pink, one purple. Maria had filled hers with crayon drawings of flowers. Betty had sketched faces people she'd never met but somehow knew. Then the birthstone necklaces. Amethyst for Betty, aquamarine for Maria. Delicate chains that didn't tarnish. Stones that caught light like tiny trapped stars. A stuffed rabbit with Betty's initials embroidered on one ear. A set of watercolor paints Maria had used until the tubes ran dry. Books. So many books. First editions, signed copies, stories about brave girls who saved kingdoms. Every gift was perfect. Every gift showed a level of attention Rachel hadn't experienced even when she and Daniel had been together. Who does this? She thought, even though she now knew the answer. Who watches from far enough away to stay hidden but close enough to know everything? The first gift. Rachel's memory pulled her backward, unwillingly, to the day it all started. Betty's 4th birthday. Rachel had been planning a small party at the park, just a few neighborhood kids, a grocery store cake, balloons tied to the picnic table. Nothing fancy. Nothing that required money she didn't have. She'd walked out to grab the mail that morning and nearly tripped over the package sitting on the welcome mat. Silver paper. Navy ribbon. Betty's name written in careful script. Rachel had checked the street. No car, no delivery truck, no person. Just the gift, placed with the kind of care that felt almost sacred. She'd brought it inside, turned it over in her hands, checked for a return address. Nothing. Betty had squealed when she'd opened it. The music box. The ballerina. The song that made her go quiet and still, like she was listening to something bigger than sound. Who gave it to me, Mommy? I don't know, baby. Maybe a neighbor? But Rachel had known, even then, that neighbors didn't give gifts like this. That night, she'd checked the news out of habit, something she rarely did anymore, trying to keep Daniel's world far from hers. And there it was. Pardon Tech CEO takes indefinite leave. Sources cite personal reasons. The article had been brief. Daniel Hardin, 34. Stepping away from day-to-day operations. No explanation. No timeline. Just gone. Rachel had told herself it was coincidence, because the alternative that Daniel had found them, that he'd been watching, that he knew about Betty and Maria and chose to stay away, was too painful to consider. But the gifts kept coming, once a month, like clockwork. Always on a Sunday morning. Always before sunrise. Always placed gently, reverently, like offerings at an altar. Rachel had tried to catch him once. She'd set an alarm for 4 a.m., stationed herself by the window, watched the street with the kind of focus that left her eyes burning. Nothing. She'd fallen asleep for 20 minutes, just 20, and when she woke, there it was. Another package, another tag, another piece of her past, refusing to stay buried. The handwriting had haunted her. She'd pulled out an old birthday card Daniel had given her years ago, back when he still celebrated things like birthdays, and held it next to the gift tag. The match was undeniable, but she dismissed it. Convinced herself she was seeing patterns that didn't exist. Because Daniel didn't know where she lived. Daniel didn't know about the girls. Daniel had moved on, hadn't he? Can you imagine? Living 5 years with that question sitting in your chest? If you've ever seen a pattern but convinced yourself you were crazy that the signs couldn't possibly mean what they obviously meant, drop a comment below, because Rachel was about to discover she'd been right all along, and wrong about everything else. Rachel pushed the gifts back into the box, her chest tight. 5 years of questions. 5 years of wondering. Who cared enough to remember Betty loved music boxes and Maria adored purple? 5 years of lying to her daughters about where the presents came from, because the truth felt too big, too complicated, too dangerous. And now Daniel's letter sat on the counter, confirming every fear she'd buried. 2 months ago, someone sent me a photo. Betty and Maria at the park. I knew the moment I saw them. Someone had sent him proof. And instead of showing up with lawyers and custody demands, he'd kept leaving gifts. Like he was afraid, like he didn't think he deserved to knock. Rachel stood, walked to the kitchen, and stared at the calendar on the fridge. June 14th, the wedding, 2 weeks away. She'd already mentally decided not to go. Decided to ignore the invitation, throw away the letter, keep her daughters far from the man who'd broken her. But then she thought about the music box, the sketchbooks, the necklaces Betty and Maria wore every single day. What kind of man does this? Not the Daniel she'd left. That Daniel had been brilliant but empty, successful but hollow, capable of building empires but incapable of building a family. This Daniel, the one who left gifts in secret, who wrote letters instead of lawsuits, who requested her daughters as flower girls instead of demanding paternity tests, was someone else entirely. Someone she didn't know. Someone she was terrified to meet. Rachel pulled the girls' small suitcases from the hallway closet and began to pack. Her hands trembled as she folded their dresses, the ones she'd bought on sale 3 months ago for Easter. The pale pink for Betty, the lavender for Maria. She packed their favorite books, their stuffed animals, their toothbrushes, shaped like cartoon characters. Betty appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. Are we going somewhere? Rachel swallowed hard. We're going to a wedding, baby. Whose wedding? A man I used to know. Do we know him too? Rachel paused, a tiny sock clutched in her hand. How do I answer that? Not yet, she said finally. But maybe you will. Maria wandered in, dragging her stuffed rabbit, the one with her initials embroidered in navy thread. The one from the anonymous gift pile. Mommy, Maria said, her voice carrying that dreamy certainty only small children possess. The angel who gives us presents is going to be at the wedding too. Rachel's breath caught. What? The angel, Maria repeated, hugging the rabbit tighter. He told me in a dream. He said he's been waiting to meet us. Betty gasped. Really? Really, really? The two girls dissolved into excited chatter, spinning stories about angels and weddings and magic, their voices bright and innocent, and utterly unaware of the grenade Maria had just lobbed into Rachel's chest. Rachel sank onto the edge of the bed, the room tilting. She knows. Not consciously. Not logically. But somewhere deep in that intuitive place children carry before the world teaches them to doubt. Maria knew. The angel wasn't an angel. The angel was their father, and he was waiting. Rachel finished packing in silence, her mind a hurricane. She zipped the suitcases, set them by the door, and pulled out her phone. The invitation email stared back at her, the RSVP button blinking like a countdown. Her thumb hovered. 1 click and she'd be committed. 1 click and she'd walk back into Daniel Hardin's world with their daughters in tow. 1 click and everything she'd built, the safety, the distance, the peace would shatter. But the gifts sat in the box in the closet, and Maria's words echoed in her skull. He's been waiting to meet us. Rachel closed her eyes, pressed the button, and typed 3 words that felt like surrender. We'll be there. The boutique smelled like lavender and expensive fabric. Rachel stood just inside the doorway of Bianco Bridal, her daughters pressed against her sides like small anchors, keeping her from floating away. The space was all cream, silk, and gold mirrors, the kind of place where price tags didn't exist, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. A woman glided toward them, her smile practiced and warm. "You must be Rachel," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I'm Amanda Bianco. Thank you so much for coming." Rachel shook her hand, feeling the difference immediately. Amanda's grip was soft, confident, unburdened by years of single motherhood and minimum wage anxiety. "These must be Betty and Maria." Amanda crouched down, her cream dress pooling around her like something from a fairy tale. "Girls, you're even more beautiful than Daniel," said. Betty's eyes went wide. "Daniel talked about us?" Amanda's smile never faltered. "Oh, constantly. He insisted we have you as flower girls. Wouldn't take no for an answer." Actually, Rachel's stomach clenched. Maria tugged Amanda's sleeve. "Will Daniel like us?" The question hung in the air, innocent and devastating. Amanda glanced up at Rachel, something flickering across her face. Understanding, maybe, or pity. "Sweetheart, he already does." Rachel couldn't breathe. The fitting. A seamstress appeared with 2 miniature dresses draped over her arms, silk, the color of champagne, delicate lace at the collars, hand-stitched pearls along the hems. The kind of dresses little girls dreamed about. Betty gasped. Maria reached out to touch the fabric like it might vanish. "Go ahead," Amanda said gently. "Try them on. There's a changing room right through there." The girls disappeared in a flurry of giggles and rustling silk. Rachel stood frozen, hyper-aware of Amanda watching her. "You seem surprised," Amanda said carefully. "I am. Daniel didn't tell you he was paying for everything?" "Daniel didn't tell me anything. Just sent an invitation." Amanda's expression shifted subtle, but Rachel caught it. Concern, maybe guilt. "I see." Amanda gestured toward a velvet settee. "Please. Sit. Can I get you tea? Water?" "I'm fine." But she sat anyway, her legs unsteady. Amanda settled beside her, close enough to feel intimate, but far enough to stay polite. She smelled like jasmine and old money. "Rachel," Amanda said quietly, "I need you to understand something. Daniel chose your daughters specifically. Not because they're talented or connected, or because their parents are powerful." She paused. "He chose them because when he saw their photo, something in him broke open. He said they reminded him of someone he once loved." Rachel's throat closed. Someone he once loved. Not someone he used to know. Not a former employee. Loved. Present tense, buried in past syntax. "I don't understand why he'd," Rachel started, but her voice cracked. "Why he'd invite you to his wedding," Amanda finished gently. "Neither do I, honestly. But Daniel isn't the man people think he is. He's complicated, haunted by things he won't talk about, and for some reason, having your girls here matters to him more than anything else about this wedding. More than the bride," Rachel thought but didn't say. Betty and Maria burst from the dressing room, spinning in their gowns, laughing like bells. "Mommy, look." Maria twirled, the dress catching light. "I'm a princess." "You're both princesses," Rachel whispered, her vision blurring. Amanda stood, clapping softly. "Absolutely perfect. Daniel's going to be so happy." And there it was again. That name, that weight. Daniel, not my fiancé, not my soon-to-be husband. Just Daniel, spoken like someone discussing a business partner. Or a charity case. Now let's step back for a second. Because this is important. How many of you have watched someone marry for the wrong reasons? For money? For status? For family expectations instead of love? Amanda's about to reveal something that changes everything. If you've ever settled or watched someone you care about settle, hit that share button because someone in your life needs to hear what happens next. The overheard conversation. While the seamstress adjusted hems and pinned fabric, Rachel excused herself to find the restroom. She followed the hallway toward the back of the boutique, past gilded mirrors and arrangements of white roses that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She was almost to the restroom door when she heard voices low, urgent, coming from a half-open office. Rachel froze. Can't keep pretending this is normal? Amanda. A man's voice. Clipped. Efficient. Alice, we've been over this. Amanda's voice, firmer now, stripped of its earlier warmth. The arrangement benefits both families. Hardin Tech gets the Bianco distribution network. My father's company gets the AI patents. It's clean. Clean? Ellis Sanders. Rachel remembered the name from the invitation email. Sounded incredulous. You're marrying a man who's in love with someone else. Silence. Rachel's heart hammered so loud she was certain they'd hear it. Daniel doesn't love me, Amanda said finally, her voice steady. And I don't love him. But we respect each other. We understand what this is. A transaction. A partnership. Then why? Ellis pressed. Did he insist on inviting her? Why risk everything for a woman who walked away 5 years ago? Because he's hoping she'll stop him. Rachel's breath caught. He thinks if she sees him about to marry someone else, she'll finally tell him the truth. About the girls. About why she left. About whether there's anything left worth saving. That's insane. That's Daniel. A long pause. Then Ellis spoke again, quieter. And if she doesn't stop him? If she just sits there and watches? Then he goes through with it, Amanda said softly. And he spends the rest of his life wondering what might have been if he'd just been brave enough to knock on her door instead of leaving gifts on her porch like a coward. Rachel stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth. He knew. He'd known about the girls before the wedding invitation, before the email, maybe for months, and he'd been too afraid to face her. She returned to the fitting room on autopilot, her mind spinning. The girls were admiring themselves in a three-way mirror, the seamstress fussing over final adjustments. Amanda stood to the side, scrolling through her phone, the picture of bridal composure, but Rachel saw her differently now. Saw the performance, the carefully constructed facade of a woman entering a marriage that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with boardrooms and merger agreements. Amanda glanced up, caught Rachel staring. For just a moment, their eyes met. And Rachel saw it, the sadness, the resignation, the quiet acceptance of a life planned by everyone except the person living it. Amanda looked away first. The revelation. They were packing up to leave, the girls clutching goodie bags filled with expensive chocolates and tiny tiaras when Ellis Sanders approached. He was tall, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that looked like it never smiled but probably used to. Miss Starnes, he said, extending his hand. Ellis Sanders. I'm coordinating the wedding logistics. Rachel shook his hand warily. Nice to meet you. I wanted to personally thank you for agreeing to participate. I know this must be complicated. That's one word for it. Ellis glanced at the girls, who were twirling in the boutique entrance, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. I need you to know something, he said quietly. When Daniel asked me to send that invitation, he didn't just request your daughters. Rachel's pulse spiked. What do you mean? Ellis met her eyes, and something in his expression made her knees weak. He asked for you by name, Rachel. Gave me your exact address, your phone number, your email. Told me to make sure you received the invitation personally. Not the girls. You. The floor tilted. Why? Because, Ellis said carefully, this wedding isn't about Amanda. It never was. He handed her a small card, thick stock, Daniel's handwriting, rehearsal dinner. Friday, 7 p.m. Please come. I need to see you before everything becomes permanent. Rachel stared at the words until they blurred. Ellis touched her shoulder gently. He's been looking for you for 5 years, Miss Starnes. And now that he's found you, I don't think he knows how to let go. He walked away, leaving Rachel standing in the boutique doorway, her daughters spinning in their princess dresses, completely unaware that their entire world was about to collide with the man who'd been watching from the shadows, waiting, hoping, terrified to be seen. The Hardin estate was the kind of beautiful that felt like a threat. Rachel stood at the edge of the terraced garden, clutching her purse like a shield, watching Betty and Maria practice their flower girl duties under the gentle instruction of a wedding coordinator who probably earned more per hour than Rachel made in a week. White petals scattered across stone pathways. String lights hung from ancient oak trees, waiting for sunset to bring them to life. Everything was perfect. Rachel tried to disappear into the background, standing near the catering tent, beside a marble fountain, anywhere that felt like not here. But she was here. And somewhere in this perfectly manicured paradise, so was he. The girls were radiant. Barefoot on the grass, laughing as they practiced their synchronized walk down the makeshift aisle. Maria's timing was off. She kept rushing ahead, too excited to wait. Betty corrected her gently, the way Rachel had taught her to be patient with her sister. Rachel's chest ached watching them. They had no idea what was about to happen. No idea that the man who'd been leaving them gifts for 5 years was somewhere behind these pristine hedges and crystal champagne flutes. No idea their entire world was balanced on the edge of a moment that could either heal or shatter them. "Again, girls," the coordinator called, clapping her hands. "Beautiful. One more time." Rachel wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the June warmth. She felt it before she saw him. That specific weight of being watched. The particular tension of a gaze that knew you too intimately to be casual. Her spine stiffened. The air around her changed, charged, electric, impossible to ignore. Slowly, against every survival instinct screaming at her to run, Rachel turned. And there he was. Here's where it gets important, really important. What happens in the next 60 seconds will change 3 lives forever. Pay close attention to how Daniel moves, how he speaks, what he does with his hands. These details matter because they reveal everything about who he's become. You'll want to remember this moment. The recognition. Daniel Harden stood 15 feet away, half hidden by a rose trellis, looking at her like she was a ghost he'd been chasing through dreams. He'd aged. Not badly, wealth didn't allow that, but visibly. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. A weariness in his posture that no amount of tailored clothing could disguise. But his eyes, those dark amber eyes that Betty had inherited, were exactly the same, still intense, still capable of making her feel like the only person in the world, or the only person he'd lost. Rachel. Her name in his voice after 5 years of silence nearly buckled her knees. He took a step closer, then stopped, like he'd hit an invisible barrier. "Is it really you?" She couldn't speak. Her throat had closed completely. Daniel's gaze swept over her, not possessive or hungry, but searching. Desperate. Like he was trying to memorize proof that she was real and standing in front of him, and not another hallucination conjured by guilt and longing. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice rough. "I hoped, but I didn't think." And then his eyes shifted. Past Rachel. To the garden path where Betty and Maria were frozen mid-step, petals clutched in small fists, staring at the stranger who'd appeared like he'd walked straight out of their mother's nightmares. Daniel went absolutely still. Rachel watched it happen in real time, the recognition crashing over him like a wave. His face drained of color, his breath caught audibly. One hand reached out slightly, trembling, like he was trying to touch something he couldn't quite believe existed. "Oh my God," he whispered. Betty tilted her head, studying him with that unsettling perceptiveness she'd always had. Maria took a tiny step forward, and Daniel, billionaire CEO, tech empire builder, man who'd commanded boardrooms and crushed competitors without flinching, actually stumbled backward, catching himself on the rose trellis. Thorns be damned. The approach. "Daniel, don't," Rachel started, but he was already moving. Not fast, not aggressive, but with the kind of determination that came from 5 years of searching and 2 months of knowing and one impossible moment of finally seeing. He approached them like they were made of spun glass, each step careful, measured. His hands shook visibly at his sides. The wedding coordinator noticed the shift in energy and quietly ushered the other staff away, giving them space. The garden went silent, except for fountain water and distant birds and Rachel's hammering heart. Daniel stopped a few feet from the girls, crouched down slowly, put himself at their eye level. "Hi," he said softly. Maria waved, still clutching her petals. "Hi." Betty didn't move, just stared at him with those eyes that matched his exactly. "You're very beautiful," Daniel said, his voice breaking on the last word. "Both of you." "Thank you," Maria said politely. "Mommy says we get that from her." Despite everything, Daniel smiled a real smile, sad and aching, and utterly transformed by it. "She's not wrong." He looked at Betty, who was still studying him with unnerving intensity. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Betty." "Betty," he repeated, like he was tasting something precious. "That's perfect." "I know you," Betty said suddenly. Rachel's breath stopped. Daniel went very still. "You do? You're the angel." His face crumpled. "What?" "The one who leaves presents. Maria said you were an angel, but I thought angels had wings." "You don't have wings." Daniel looked up at Rachel, and the devastation in his expression nearly broke her. "No," he whispered. "I don't have wings." "Are you magic then?" Maria asked, stepping closer. "No, sweetheart. I'm just—" His voice failed. He tried again. "I'm just someone who cares about you very much." Betty took one step forward, then another. She reached out and touched his face, small fingers against his jaw, exploring the unfamiliar terrain of cheekbones and stubble. "You have my eyes," she said. Daniel closed his eyes against her touch, and when he opened them again, tears tracked down his face. He didn't wipe them away. "You have mine," he corrected softly, and then Betty said the words that shattered the careful distance Rachel had spent 5 years building. "Daddy?" Not a statement. A question. Tentative and terrified and desperately hopeful. Daniel made a sound, half sob, half broken laugh. "Yes," he breathed. "Yes, baby. I'm your daddy." Maria gasped. "Really? Really? Really?" The twins looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. The language of sisters, of shared DNA, of intuition. Rachel would never fully understand. Then they moved as one, crashing into Daniel's arms. He caught them, folding around them like he was trying to shield them from a world that had already taken too much time from them. His shoulders shook. He pressed his face against Betty's hair, then Maria's, breathing them in like oxygen after drowning. "I'm sorry," he whispered, over and over. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I would have God. I would have moved mountains. I'm so sorry." Rachel stood frozen, watching the scene she'd spent 5 years preventing happen anyway. And then Daniel looked up at her over their daughters' heads, and the anguish in his eyes cut straight through her. "Why didn't you tell me about them?" The question hung in the air, not accusatory, not angry, just broken. Just a man staring at 5 years of missed birthdays and first words and bedtime stories and drawings on refrigerators that he would never get back. "Why, Rachel? Why didn't you tell me I had daughters?" "Now, here's what you need to understand, and I need you to really hear this next part. Second chances don't come often. And when they do, they're messy and complicated and nothing like the movies. If you believe people can change, if you've ever wanted someone to prove they're not who they used to be, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens next will either restore your faith or break your heart. And you need to see which one." Rachel ran, not gracefully, not with any plan. Propelling her away from the garden, away from Daniel's question hanging in the air like an accusation, away from the image of her daughters in their father's arms, finally understanding what she'd kept from them. She made it to the side gate before his voice stopped her. "Rachel, please." She didn't turn around. Couldn't. Her hands gripped the iron bars of the gate, knuckles white. "I need to get the girls home," she said, her voice shaking. "This was a mistake. Don't." His footsteps came closer. "Don't run from me again." "I'm not running. You've been running for 5 years." The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Rachel spun around, and suddenly he was there, close enough that she could see the tears still wet on his face. Close enough to remember what it felt like when those same eyes had looked at her with something other than grief. "You want to know why I didn't tell you?" The words exploded out of her. Because you told me to handle it, Daniel. You looked at the ultrasound photo of your child and told me to handle it like I was a problem that needed solving. He flinched. Rachel, I was terrified and pregnant and alone, and you had a board meeting. I didn't know what you were telling me. You didn't want to know. Her voice cracked. You'd spent our entire relationship making it clear that children were distractions, that family was weakness, that building your empire was the only thing that mattered. So when I got pregnant, I knew exactly what I was to you. Expendable. Daniel's face drained of color. That's not. I left because staying would have destroyed me, Rachel continued, tears streaming now. Because I couldn't watch you resent our baby the way your father resented you. Because I loved you too much to let you turn into him. Silence. Daniel stood there, chest heaving, looking like she'd physically struck him. I never knew you were pregnant, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel laughed bitterly. I told you. That night in your office. You said you needed to talk. That something had happened. That we needed to figure things out. His hands shook as he ran them through his hair. And I said, God, I said the worst possible thing. Handle it. But Rachel, I thought you were talking about us. About the relationship. About how I'd been distant and cold and impossible to reach. She stared at him. What? You left before I could process anything. Before I could ask what you meant. I came home that night, and you were gone. No note. No explanation. Just gone. His voice broke. I thought you left because I wasn't enough. Because I'd failed you so completely that you couldn't even stay long enough to have the conversation. Rachel's legs went weak. You didn't know. I didn't know. The devastation in his admission was absolute. I spent 3 weeks calling everyone we knew, checking hospitals, filing missing person reports. The police said you weren't missing. You'd withdrawn money, packed your things, left voluntarily. They said you clearly didn't want to be found. I didn't, Rachel whispered. I know. Daniel took a shaky breath. But that didn't stop me from looking. I hired investigators, flew to cities where you had family, checked every Rachel Starnes in the system. You vanished so completely it was like you'd never existed. I had to, she said. I couldn't raise them in your world. The corporate politics, the media scrutiny, the constant pressure to be perfect. I wanted them to have normal childhoods, playground dirt under their fingernails and grocery store birthday cakes and bedtimes that didn't revolve around networking events. You thought I'd take that from them. I thought you wouldn't want them at all. The words hung between them 5 years of assumptions, 5 years of separate narratives built on incomplete information, 5 years of pain that could have been prevented by one completed conversation. Take a breath, because it gets worse before it gets better. Have you ever built an entire story in your head about why someone did what they did only to discover you were completely wrong? Drop a comment below if you've ever misunderstood someone so badly it cost you years. Because Rachel and Daniel are about to realize they've both been wrong this entire time. Daniel stepped closer. When did you find out? That you were pregnant? 2 weeks before I left. And you were sure I'd reject you. Positive. Because I'd been terrible to you for months. Rachel nodded, throat tight. You were drowning in the merger. You barely came home. When you did, you were somewhere else entirely. And when you talked about the future, it was always empire, expansion, legacy, never family. Because I was terrified, Daniel said, his voice raw. My father raised me to believe that love made you weak. That caring about people gave them power over you. That the only thing that mattered was building something that couldn't be taken away. He paused. And then, I met you. And suddenly, all those rules felt like chains. Rachel's breath caught. I was going to quit, he continued. The merger, the board seat, all of it. I'd started drafting my resignation the week before you left. Because I'd finally figured out that building an empire was meaningless if I was doing it alone. What? I was going to choose you, Rachel. I was just too late. The confession shattered something in her chest. You never told me. Because you left before I could. Daniel's eyes glistened. And when you disappeared, I thought I'd been right all along. That caring about someone had made me weak. That I'd driven away the only thing that mattered by being exactly what my father raised me to be. Rachel wiped her face with shaking hands. We're both idiots. Catastrophically. A broken laugh escaped her. Then another. Then she was crying and laughing simultaneously. 5 years of tension finally cracking open. Daniel moved closer, tentative. The girls, Betty and Maria. Rachel's laughter died. Yes? His voice dropped to something almost fragile. Are they really mine? She looked at him, this man she'd loved and feared. She looked at him, this man she'd loved and feared and run from, and apparently misunderstood so completely it had cost them years. Yes, she whispered, they're yours. Daniel's knees actually buckled. He caught himself against the gate. One hand over his mouth, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. 5 years, he choked out. I missed 5 years of their lives. I know. Their first words. Their first steps. Every birthday. Every scraped knee. Every. His voice shattered completely. Rachel did something she hadn't done in 5 years. She reached for him. Her hand found his shoulder, and the touch broke whatever dam he'd been holding. Daniel turned into her, not embracing, just collapsing against her like he'd been carrying the weight alone for too long. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. So am I. He pulled back, wiping his face roughly. But Rachel, I need you to hear this. She nodded. Daniel looked directly into her eyes, and what she saw there wasn't anger or resentment or the coldness she remembered. It was determination. I lost 5 years, he said, his voice steady now, despite the tears. 5 years of watching them grow. 5 years of being their father. 5 years I will never get back. Rachel braced herself for the custody battle, the lawyers, the fight. But instead, Daniel said, but I won't lose another day. Not a threat. A promise. I don't know how to do this, he continued. I don't know how to be a father, or how to earn back your trust, or how to exist in their lives without disrupting everything you've built. But I'm going to learn, and I'm going to be there. He stepped back, giving her space. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance. Just one chance to prove that the man I should have been 5 years ago is the man I've become. Rachel stared at him, at the gray in his hair and the exhaustion in his posture and the desperate hope in his eyes, and realized she was seeing someone new. Someone who'd been carved out and rebuilt by loss. Someone who might actually be capable of choosing love over empire. Someone who looked terrifyingly like the man she'd always hoped he could be. The wedding, she said quietly. You're getting married in 2 days. Daniel's expression went carefully blank. Am I? And Rachel understood. The whole thing, the invitation, the flower girls, the perfectly orchestrated reunion had been a gamble. A last, desperate play to bring her back into his world and give him one chance to rewrite the ending. This is insane, she whispered. I know. The girls barely know you. I know. I don't trust you. I know. He took a breath. But Rachel? They called me Daddy. And I've been waiting 5 years to hear that word. His voice broke on the last syllable. So I'm asking, begging for one chance. However you want it. Whatever boundaries you need. Just, please don't take them away again. Rachel looked back toward the garden, where Betty and Maria were still practicing their petal toss, laughing and oblivious and perfect. Her daughters, their daughters. One chance, she said finally. Daniel exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. One chance. The morning of the wedding arrived like an ending disguised as a celebration. Rachel woke at dawn in the guest cottage. Daniel had arranged small, elegant, far enough from the main estate to feel like escape was still possible. Betty and Maria were still asleep, tangled in white sheets that cost more than Rachel's monthly rent, their flower girl dresses hanging like ghosts on the closet door. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face, when the girls had called him Daddy, the way he'd crumbled, the way he'd rebuilt himself in seconds and promised not to lose another day. One chance, she'd said. But giving him a chance meant watching him marry someone else in 6 hours. The thought made her stomach turn. The unraveling. By 9 a.m., something was wrong. Rachel could feel it the moment she stepped onto the estate grounds with the girls. Staff members rushed past, carrying clipboards and phones, their polished professionalism cracking at the edges. Whispered conversations died when she walked by. Eyes tracked her with something between curiosity and accusation. The wedding coordinator, the same woman who directed the rehearsal with military precision, stood near the ceremony pavilion. Phone pressed to her ear, her face pale. "I don't care what his reasons are," she hissed. "We have 300 guests arriving in 4 hours and a groom who won't come out of his suite." Rachel's pulse spiked. Betty tugged her hand. "Mommy, why does everyone look scared?" "I don't know, baby." But she did know. Somehow, she knew. Maria pointed toward the main house. "Is Daddy okay?" The word still felt foreign. Daddy. Like trying on a language they'd just learned. "I'm sure he's fine," Rachel lied. A commotion near the entrance caught her attention. Amanda Bianco emerging from a black car, still in casual clothes, her expression strained. She spotted Rachel and changed direction immediately, heels clicking across the stone pathway. "Rachel." Amanda's composure was fracturing. "Have you seen Daniel?" "No, I just got here. He's locked himself in his suite. Won't answer calls, won't open the door. Ellis has been trying to talk to him for 2 hours." Amanda's voice dropped. "Did something happen yesterday?" "After the rehearsal?" Rachel's throat closed. "We talked. About why I left. About the girls. About..." She couldn't finish. Amanda's eyes widened with understanding. Then something like resignation settled across her features. "Of course. I didn't mean to ruin your wedding." "You didn't ruin anything, Rachel." Amanda's laugh was hollow. "You just reminded him what he actually wants." Before Rachel could respond, Ellis Sanders appeared, moving fast, his usual composure completely shattered. "Miss Starnes," he was breathless. "I need you to come with me." "What's wrong?" "He won't say his vows." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "Daniel. He's refusing to proceed with the ceremony. He's asking for you." Rachel's vision narrowed. The estate grounds tilted. Betty and Maria clutched her hands tighter, sensing the shift. "I can't," Rachel started. "This is your wedding. I shouldn't be." "Please," Ellis interrupted, and the desperation in his voice was startling. "If he doesn't come out in the next hour, we'll have to cancel." 300 guests. International media. Both families. This will be a scandal that destroys months of negotiations. Amanda stepped forward. "Go, Rachel." "But," I said go. Amanda's voice was firm but not unkind. "Whatever he needs to say to you, he should have said it 5 years ago. Better late than never." The suite? Ellis led Rachel through a private entrance, up marble stairs, down a hallway lined with art that probably cost more than houses. He stopped at a heavy wooden door. "He's in there," Ellis said quietly. "He asked for you specifically. Said he couldn't do this until he talked to you." Rachel's hand shook. "What do I say?" "The truth, I imagine." Ellis knocked twice. "Daniel, she's here." Silence. Then, "Send her in." "Alone?" Ellis opened the door, gestured Rachel through, and closed it behind her. The suite was enormous floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the estate. Furniture that belonged in museums. Morning light pouring across hardwood floors. Daniel stood at the window, still in his dress shirt and slacks. No jacket, no tie. His back was to her, shoulders tense. One hand braced against the window frame. "You came," he said without turning. "Ellis said you wouldn't do the ceremony." "I won't." Rachel's heart hammered. "Daniel, you can't just cancel a wedding because..." "Because what?" He turned finally, and the look on his face stopped her cold. "Because I spent one day with my daughters and realized everything I've built means nothing without them? Because I had one real conversation with you after 5 years, and remembered what it felt like to be human. This isn't fair to Amanda. Amanda knows. Daniel moved toward her, not close, but closer. She's always known. This wedding was a business arrangement. A merger of families and corporations. I was a fool to agree to it. Then why did you? Because I thought you were gone forever. His voice cracked. I thought if I couldn't have the family I wanted, I'd build the empire my father always demanded. I'd marry for strategy instead of love. I'd become exactly what he raised me to be. And now? Now I have daughters who call me daddy. Now I have a second chance I don't deserve. Now I have. He stopped, looking at her with devastating intensity. Now I have you standing in front of me, and I can't pretend anymore. Pretend what? That I'm over you. That the past 5 years were anything except purgatory. That I could stand at that altar and promise myself to someone else while the only woman I've ever loved watches from the guest section. Rachel couldn't breathe. Don't do this. I have to do this. Daniel took another step closer. Because if I marry Amanda today, I lose any chance of being the father Betty and Maria deserve. I lose any chance of proving to you that I've changed. I lose God, Rachel. I lose everything that actually matters. What about the scandal? The media? The business deals? Let them burn. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I've spent 34 years building walls around my heart and calling it success. I'm done. I won't enter a marriage for business. Not when my family is here. The door burst open. Ellis stood there, phone in hand, face ashen. Daniel, the guests are arriving. The media vans are parked outside. I need to know, are we proceeding or canceling? Daniel looked at Rachel. Only at Rachel. Canceling. Ellis went pale. You're sure? Completely. The press will destroy you. Let them. Daniel's voice was steady. Get Amanda. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her she deserves someone who loves her the way she deserves. And then, he paused. Tell the guests the wedding is off. Effective immediately. Ellis stared at him like he'd gone insane. Then, slowly, nodded. I'll make the announcement. He left. Rachel and Daniel stood in the sudden silence, the weight of what he'd just done settling between them. You just ended your wedding, Rachel whispered. I just saved my life. The aftermath. 20 minutes later, Rachel stood at the edge of the garden watching controlled chaos unfold. Guests in designer clothing clustered in confused groups. Media crews swarmed the gates. Staff members frantically redirected people, fielded questions, managed the impossible task of dismantling a wedding that was supposed to cement 2 empires. Ellis stood on the ceremony platform, microphone in hand, making the announcement that would be headline news by evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that today's ceremony has been postponed indefinitely. Mr. Harden and Miss Bianco have mutually decided to part ways. We appreciate your understanding during this private matter. Gasps, murmurs, the click of cameras. Rachel felt someone approach. Turned to find Amanda beside her, still in casual clothes, watching the scene with eerie calm. I'm sorry, Rachel said. I never meant. Stop. Amanda's voice was gentle. He never loved me, Rachel. He loved someone else. I've known that since the day he proposed. She paused. I just wish he'd been brave enough to tell me sooner. Would have saved us both a lot of trouble. Why did you agree to marry him? Because I thought love didn't matter. That partnership and respect were enough. Amanda smiled sadly. But watching him with your daughters yesterday? Watching him look at you like you were the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life? I realized I was wrong. She turned to face Rachel fully. He's going to fight for you. For them. With everything he has. I hope you're ready. Before Rachel could respond, Betty and Maria ran up, flower girl dresses still on, petals forgotten. Mommy, Betty said breathlessly. Everyone's leaving. Is the wedding broken? Rachel crouched down, pulling them close. Yeah, baby. The wedding's broken. Is Daddy okay? And there it was, that word again. No longer tentative, just fact. Daddy? I think, Rachel said carefully, Daddy's finally okay. Maria looked toward the main house where Daniel had just emerged, tie loosened, surrounded by concerned staff members. His eyes found Rachel's across the chaos, and he smiled. Not the corporate smile, not the practiced charm, something real, something that looked terrifyingly like hope. The estate grounds were emptying, cars departing in steady streams, guests whispering theories that would become tomorrow's headlines, staff members dismantling a wedding that would never happen. But in the garden, beneath the oak trees, strung with lights that would never illuminate a ceremony, 3 people stood frozen in the center of the unraveling. Daniel had followed them there after the announcement. Not rushed, not desperate, just steady, purposeful steps across the grass until he stood a few feet away, watching Betty and Maria with an expression Rachel had never seen on his face before. Reverence, like he was looking at something sacred he'd been searching for his entire life. The girls stared back, flower girl dresses still perfect, petals scattered at their feet, processing what they'd just witnessed, the chaos, the cancellation, the way every adult around them had suddenly moved, like the world was ending. Betty spoke first. She always did. "The wedding didn't happen," she said, more observation than question. "No," Daniel agreed quietly. "It didn't." "Why?" He crouched down slowly, putting himself at their eye level the way he'd done at the rehearsal. But this time was different. This time the walls were completely gone. This time Rachel could see every ounce of longing, fear, and desperate hope written across his face. "Because I realized something important," Daniel said softly. "What?" Maria asked, tilting her head. "That weddings are about promising to be with the people you love, and I couldn't promise that to someone when—" His voice caught. He tried again. "When the people I love most in the world were standing right here." Betty took a small step forward. "You love us? More than anything. But you just met us." "I know." Daniel's hands trembled slightly. "But I've been watching you for a long time, leaving you gifts, hoping one day I'd be brave enough to knock on your door instead of leaving presents and running away." "You were the angel," Maria breathed. "I was the coward," Daniel corrected gently. "But I'm trying to be braver now." Rachel stood a few feet back, her throat closing, watching the scene unfold like something from someone else's life. Betty looked at Daniel with those dark amber eyes they shared, analytical, measuring, deciding. "Are you our daddy?" she asked. The question hung in the air, impossibly heavy for 3 small words. Daniel's face crumpled. He took a shaky breath, collecting himself, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. "If you'll have me." Not yes, not of course. "If you'll have me," giving them the choice, giving them the power. Acknowledging that fatherhood wasn't biology, it was acceptance. And here's the thing about second chances: they don't look like movie moments. They look like this. Messy. Terrifying. A grown man on his knees, asking children for permission to love them. If you've ever had to earn back trust you broke, if you've ever asked someone to believe you've changed, share this with them. Because what happens next is everything. Betty and Maria looked at each other. That silent twin communication again. Entire conversations happening in glances and micro-expressions Rachel would never fully understand. Then Maria moved first. She walked straight into Daniel's arms, wrapped her small hands around his neck, and buried her face in his shoulder. "I'll have you," she whispered. Daniel made a sound, half sob, half laugh, and caught her, holding her like she was made of starlight and second chances. Betty hesitated one moment longer. Then she stepped forward, pressing herself against his other side, completing the circle. "Me too," she said quietly. "I'll have you too." Daniel wrapped his arms around both of them, folding them into his chest, and broke completely. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. He pressed his face against their hair, breathing them in. 5 years of grief and longing and desperate love, finally finding a place to land. "Thank you," he whispered, voice shattered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Rachel's vision blurred. She pressed her hand against her mouth, watching the man she'd left build the family she'd thought he'd never want. The girls held him tight, these children who'd lived 5 years without a father, adapting with the fluid acceptance of the young, reshaping their understanding of family to include this trembling, wealthy, broken man who looked at them like they'd saved his life. and maybe they had. The request, eventually, the embrace loosened. Daniel wiped his face roughly, not bothering to hide the tears. The girls stayed close, Maria holding his hand, Betty leaning against his side. He looked up at Rachel. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. "Just for a minute?" Rachel nodded, throat too tight for words. Daniel said something soft to the girls. Rachel couldn't hear it, and they scampered off to explore the garden fountain, still within sight but far enough to give privacy. Daniel stood, turning to face her fully. "I know what I'm asking is impossible," he began. "I know I have no right to any of this. To them, to you, to the past 5 years I missed. Daniel, please, let me finish." He took a breath. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to forget what I said when you told me you were pregnant, or the man I was when you left. That man deserved to lose you." His voice dropped. "But I'm asking for time. Time to earn your trust. Time to be present in their lives however that looks, whatever boundaries you need. Time to prove that I'm not the man who chose empire over family anymore." Rachel watched him, this Daniel, who'd canceled his own wedding, who'd knelt in the grass and asked his daughters for permission to love them, who looked at her now with none of the cold calculation she remembered. "I see it," she said softly. "See what? The sincerity. The change. Whatever broke you open and rebuilt you." She paused. "The Daniel I left wouldn't have done any of this." "No," he agreed. "That Daniel wouldn't have known how. And this Daniel knows exactly what he lost, and will spend the rest of his life making sure he never loses it again." The conviction in his voice was absolute. Rachel looked toward the fountain where Betty was showing Maria how to skip stones across the water, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Her daughters, their daughters. A family she'd tried to build alone suddenly expanding to include the one person she'd thought would never fit. "I need you to understand something," Rachel said carefully. "They're my entire world. I've spent 5 years protecting them, providing for them, being everything they needed, and I did it alone because I believed I had to. I know, if you're going to be in their lives, if you're going to be their father, I need to know you're committed. Not just when it's convenient. Not just when it fits your schedule. Every day, every scraped knee, every nightmare. Every parent-teacher conference and swim lesson and tantrum in the grocery store. Yes, yes, yes to all of it." Daniel's voice was steady. "I don't care about board meetings or empire building or any of it anymore. I care about being there when Betty wakes up from bad dreams. I care about teaching Maria how to ride a bike. I care about God, Rachel. I care about being the father they deserve, even if I have no idea what I'm doing." "You don't," Rachel said, and almost smiled. "You really don't. Then teach me." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something in her chest. "Please. I'm asking, begging for a chance to learn." Rachel looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the billionaire CEO or the man who'd told her to handle it, but someone entirely new, someone carved out by loss and rebuilt by longing, someone who might actually be capable of the transformation she'd thought impossible. "One day at a time," she said finally. Daniel exhaled shakily. "One day at a time. And Daniel?" "Yeah?" Rachel's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I'm not ready." He went very still. "Ready for what?" "For us. For whatever this." She gestured between them. "For trust, for forgiveness, for anything beyond co-parenting. I'm not ready." The words could have destroyed him, should have destroyed him, but instead, Daniel just nodded. Okay, I'll wait," he said simply. "However long it takes. Years if I have to. Because Rachel, you're worth waiting for. And this," he looked toward the girls, "this family we're trying to build, it's worth getting right, even if it takes forever." The promise settled between them, solid and real. Not romance, not reconciliation, just patience, just presence. Just a man willing to earn back what he'd lost one day at a time. Betty called out from the fountain, "Daddy, come see." Daniel flinched at the word, eyes bright with fresh tears. "Go," Rachel said softly. He went, and Rachel watched him kneel beside their daughters, listening intently to whatever discovery they'd made in the fountain water, and felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the first fragile roots of hope. The first week was chaos disguised as routine. Daniel showed up at Rachel's small rental house every morning at 7:30, dressed like he was trying to blend in jeans instead of tailored suits, plain t-shirts instead of custom button-downs, looking desperately out of place in a neighborhood where front porches sagged and cars were 10 years old. But he showed up, every single day, learning by doing. The first morning, he took the girls to the park. Rachel watched from the porch as Betty and Maria dragged him toward the swings, his movements awkward and uncertain. He pushed them too gently at first, then too hard when Maria complained. He didn't know you had to check for wood chips in their shoes after the playground. Didn't realize Maria wouldn't eat anything green, and Betty required her sandwich cut diagonally, never straight across. He was terrible at being a father, but he was trying. Rachel found them 2 hours later near the duck pond. Daniel was crouched in the mud, helping Maria feed crackers to a particularly aggressive goose, while Betty lectured him about proper waterfowl nutrition from something she'd learned in kindergarten. "They have 3 eyelids," Betty was saying seriously. "Did you know that?" "I didn't," Daniel replied, equally serious. "That's extraordinary. You should write it down so you remember." "I will." He caught Rachel watching and smiled, exhausted, genuine, covered in mud and goose feathers. "We made a friend," he said, gesturing to the goose. "I can see that." Maria ran up, grabbing Rachel's hand. "Daddy doesn't know anything about ducks, Mommy. We have to teach him everything." Daddy. The word was fully theirs now, no longer tentative, just fact woven into their vocabulary like it had always been there. Rachel looked at Daniel, this billionaire CEO sitting in pond mud, completely out of his element, learning about 3 eyelid ducks from a 5-year-old, and something in her chest loosened. The hard questions. Thursday afternoon, Daniel helped Betty with her homework at the kitchen table while Rachel made dinner. Multiplication tables. Betty was struggling, frustrated, erasing so hard the paper tore. Hey, Daniel said gently, placing his hand over hers. "It's okay. We'll figure it out together. I'm stupid at math. You're not stupid at anything. Math just takes practice." They worked through problems slowly, Daniel's patience surprising Rachel. He didn't rush, didn't get frustrated. Just sat there, explaining, carrying the 1 and grouping by tens, until Betty's frown softened into understanding. Then, out of nowhere, Betty asked, "Why didn't you come sooner?" Daniel went very still. The pencil in his hand stopped moving. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Maria and me are 5, but you just came now. Why?" Rachel froze at the stove, spatula suspended midair. Daniel set the pencil down carefully. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "Because I didn't know you existed." "Why didn't you know?" "Because," his voice broke completely. He tried again. "Because your mommy and I had a big misunderstanding. I said something terrible that hurt her feelings very badly, and she left before I could fix it, before I could tell her I was sorry, before I knew she was going to have you." Betty processed this with that unsettling intelligence. "Did you look for us?" "Every day for 5 years. That's a long time. The longest time of my life." Daniel wiped his eyes roughly. "And Betty? I need you to know something. If I had known about you and Maria, if I had known for even 1 second that you existed, I would have moved mountains to find you. I would have given up everything. I would have." His voice shattered. Betty climbed into his lap, something she'd started doing that week, like she'd been doing it forever, and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "It's okay, Daddy. You're here now." Daniel buried his face in her hair and sobbed. Rachel turned away, giving them privacy, her own vision blurring. Small vulnerabilities. The moments accumulated like pieces of a puzzle, slowly revealing its picture. Friday evening, Daniel stayed late helping install a shelf in the girls' room, something Rachel had been meaning to do for months. They worked in comfortable silence, passing tools, measuring twice, laughing when he dropped the drill. "I'm better with acquisition contracts than power tools," Daniel admitted. Clearly. "In my defense, I usually have people for this." "Well, you don't anymore," he smiled. When the shelf was finally mounted, they stood back, admiring it, crooked but functional, It's perfect, Rachel said. It's a disaster. It's ours. The word hung between them. Ours. Not yours or mine, shared territory. Daniel looked at her, something unspoken passing between them. Then he cleared his throat and looked away. I should go. It's getting late. But he didn't move. Neither did she. Daniel, Rachel said quietly. Why the gifts? He went still. What? For 5 years. The silver paper, the navy ribbon. Why didn't you just knock? Daniel set down the drill, leaning against the doorframe. When he spoke, his voice was raw. Because I was terrified. Of what? That you'd slam the door in my face. That you'd call the police. That you'd look at me the way you looked at me the day you left, like I was the worst mistake you'd ever made. He paused. I thought if I left gifts, maybe you'd see I cared. Maybe Betty and Maria would have something from me, even if they never knew who I was. Maybe, his voice broke, maybe I could love them from a distance if I couldn't love them up close. Rachel's throat closed. You were never avoiding us. Never. God, Rachel. I've been circling your house for 2 years. Sitting in my car down the street. Watching them play in the yard. Memorizing their routines. Learning what they loved, so I could leave the perfect gifts. I knew Maria's favorite color was purple before I knew her name. That's creepy. Obsessive, I know. He laughed bitterly. But I couldn't stay away. And I couldn't work up the courage to knock. So I became the world's most pathetic ghost, haunting my own family. Rachel moved closer. You were scared of losing them. Terrified. But you found them anyway. Someone sent me a photo. Betty and Maria at the park. I didn't ask for it. Some investigator I'd hired years ago finally got a hit on your name. And when I saw them, he stopped, collecting himself. I saw my entire life in one picture. Everything I'd been missing. Everything I'd lost. And you started planning the wedding as a way to get you to come to me. Because I was too much of a coward to go to you. That's insane. Completely. Daniel met her eyes. But it worked. Despite everything, Rachel laughed. Actually laughed. And Daniel laughed too. Both of them standing in a crooked shelf bedroom, finding humor in the absolute chaos of their situation. We're a mess, Rachel said. Catastrophically. The girls deserve better. They deserve everything. Daniel's voice softened. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure they get it. The invitation, Saturday evening, arrived too fast. Daniel was packing up to leave his new routine, respecting boundaries, never staying past dinner, when Rachel heard herself say, Stay. He froze at the door. What? For dinner. Stay for dinner. Daniel turned slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement would shatter the offer. Are you sure? No, Rachel admitted. But I'm asking anyway. Something shifted in his expression, hope, careful, and cautious. Okay. They made spaghetti together, Daniel surprisingly competent in the kitchen, once Rachel stopped trying to do everything herself. The girls set the table with mismatched plates and too many forks. They ate like a family, arguing over breadsticks, laughing at Maria's tomato sauce-covered face, Betty explaining her latest duck facts. Normal, chaotic. Theirs. After the girls were in bed, Daniel helped clean up. They moved around each other carefully, aware of the significance of him still being there. Past 8 p.m., past bedtime, past the boundaries they'd carefully constructed. Thank you, Daniel said quietly, drying the last plate, for letting me stay. Thank you for showing up, Rachel replied. Every day, even when you didn't know what you were doing. I still don't know what I'm doing. None of us do. He set the plate down, turning to face her. Rachel, one day at a time, she interrupted gently. Remember, one day at a time, he echoed. But something had shifted. They both felt it. The distance between them was smaller now. The walls, still there but cracking. The possibility of something more than co-parenting hovering in the space between drying plates and shared laughter. Daniel left at 9:30. But Rachel watched from the window as he sat in his car for 5 full minutes before driving away, like he was trying to memorize what it felt like to have a family. And for the first time in 5 years, Rachel went to bed without locking every door. The Willow Bend Elementary School Spring Festival was pure small-town chaos, bouncy castles leaking air, face-painting stations with lines 20 kids deep, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy thick in the afternoon heat. Rachel stood near the balloon dart booth, watching Betty and Maria race toward the sack hop competition, their laughter carrying above the carnival noise. And right behind them, steady and present, was Daniel. He'd been living in Willow Bend for 3 weeks, now rented a small apartment above the hardware store, the kind of place that probably horrified his former corporate colleagues. No marble floors, no floor-to-ceiling windows. Just 2 rooms and a kitchenette where he'd learned to make boxed macaroni and burned grilled cheese. But he showed up every morning, rain or shine, good days and terrible ones. He showed up, full father mode. Rachel watched him now, crouched beside Maria at the starting line, explaining the rules of sack hopping with the same intensity he probably once used for board presentations. Keep your feet together, hold the top tight, and hop, don't try to run, or you'll fall, he was saying. What if I fall anyway? Maria asked. Then I'll help you up, and we'll try again. Simple, perfect, exactly what she needed to hear. The whistle blew. Kids started hopping in lumpy, chaotic bursts. Maria made it 3 hops before tumbling sideways into the grass. Daniel was there instantly, scooping her up, checking for scrapes, brushing grass from her hair. You okay, sweetheart? I'm okay, Maria giggled. Can I try again? As many times as you want. He helped her back into the sack, positioned her at the line again, and this time, when the whistle blew, Maria made it halfway before falling laughing the entire time. Betty finished third, running to Daniel with her bronze ribbon clutched in her fist. Daddy, look, I got a prize. You did. Daniel lifted her up, spinning her once. I'm so proud of you. Even though I didn't win, especially because you didn't give up when you wanted to. Betty beamed, throwing her arms around his neck. Rachel felt something crack wide open in her chest. This wasn't the Daniel she'd left. That Daniel had barely noticed when she accomplished things, too buried in spreadsheets and strategy meetings to celebrate small victories. That Daniel wouldn't have known what sack hopping was, let alone helped a 5-year-old navigate the devastation of falling in front of her peers. This Daniel, covered in grass stains, hair messy from the wind, shouting encouragement at a children's carnival game, was someone entirely new. Someone she was terrified to trust. Someone she was starting to believe in anyway. Let that sink in for a moment. Because transformation isn't about grand gestures, it's about showing up on Tuesday morning for homework help. It's about learning duck facts. It's about celebrating bronze ribbons like they're gold medals. If you're rebuilding something you broke, if you're trying to prove you've changed, this is your sign to keep going. Comment, keep going, if you needed to hear that today. Because people can change. And this story proves it. The conversation. They found a bench near the edge of the festival grounds while the girls ran off to get their faces painted. Daniel bought them both lemonade from a stand run by teenagers, raising money for prom. You're good at this, Rachel said quietly. At what? Being their dad. Daniel looked down at his lemonade, turning the cup in his hands. I'm stumbling through it, mostly. Last Tuesday, I let Betty eat ice cream for breakfast because I didn't know that wasn't allowed. Maria convinced me cats could be vegetarian, so I almost bought the wrong food until the pet store clerk corrected me. Rachel laughed despite herself. They're manipulating you. Constantly, he smiled. But I'm learning. Slowly. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the festival chaos unfold. Then, Daniel turned to her, something shifting in his expression, nervous, determined. Rachel, I need to ask you something. Her pulse quickened. Okay, I've been thinking about what comes next. After these 3 weeks. After we figure out some kind of routine. He paused. I don't want to co-parent from a distance. I don't want to be the every other weekend dad who sees them on holidays and misses everything in between. What are you saying? I'm saying, let's raise them together. Not as something we're forced to do, but as something we choose, in whatever way feels right to you. Separate houses, shared custody, I don't care about the logistics. I just care about being present, being here, being their father every day. Not just when it's convenient. Rachel studied his face, looking for cracks in the sincerity, finding none. This isn't a marriage proposal, Daniel added quickly. I know you're not ready for that. Hell, I'm not ready for that. But it's a partnership proposal. A family proposal. Can we try to do this together? The question hung between them, not demanding, just asking. Rachel thought about the past 3 weeks. The breakfast table laughter, the homework struggles, the bedtime stories Daniel now read with character voices that made the girls shriek with delight. The way he'd learned their routines, their preferences, their fears. The way he'd shown up when it was hard and stayed when it got harder. You really have changed, she said softly. I had to. Daniel's voice was rough. The man I was would have lost everything. The man I'm becoming, he gets to have this. Gets to have them. Maybe someday gets to have you. Daniel, I know. One day at a time. But Rachel? He met her eyes. I'll wait. As long as it takes. Years if I have to. Because you three? You're worth every second. The conviction in his voice was absolute. Rachel felt the last wall crack. Not crumble, not disappear, but crack enough to let light through. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Let's try. Together, whatever that looks like. The first touch, Daniel exhaled shakily, relief flooding his features. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers laced with hers, warm and solid and real. They sat like that, hands clasped, watching their daughters get butterflies painted on their cheeks. Neither one speaking because words would have ruined the moment. Then Rachel did something she hadn't done in 5 years. She leaned into him. Just slightly. Just enough that her shoulder pressed against his, her head tilted toward his space, her breathing matching his rhythm. Daniel went very still. Then, carefully, he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They sat like that, not kissing, not declaring love, just existing in the same space without walls between them, and it felt like the most terrifying, honest thing Rachel had done since leaving. I'm still scared, she whispered. Me too. I don't know if I can trust you completely. I'll earn it. Daniel's voice was steady. Every day, however long it takes. Betty and Maria came running back, faces covered in glitter and paint, shrieking about the balloon animals they wanted next. They crashed into their parents, a tangle of small limbs and laughter and sticky fingers, and Daniel and Rachel caught them, holding on tight. All 4 of them wrapped together in a messy, imperfect embrace. A family. Not the one Rachel had planned. Not the one Daniel had destroyed. But something new. Built from broken pieces, and second chances, and the terrifying courage it took to try again. Are you guys hugging without us? Betty demanded. Never, Daniel said, squeezing tighter. We were just waiting for you. Maria burrowed deeper into Rachel's side. Can Daddy come home with us tonight? Rachel looked at Daniel over their daughters' heads, saw the hope in his eyes, saw the man he'd become, not perfect, not completely healed, but trying, always trying. Yeah, Rachel said softly. Daddy can come home. Epilogue. That night, after spaghetti dinner and bath time battles and bedtime stories that ran too long, after Betty and Maria finally fell asleep in their shared room, Rachel and Daniel stood in the kitchen, washing dishes in comfortable silence. Thank you, Daniel said quietly. For today. For all of this. Thank you for showing up. I'll keep showing up. He dried the last plate, set it aside, turned to face her. For as long as you'll let me. Rachel looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the billionaire CEO or the man who'd broken her heart, but the father who'd learned to sack hop and make terrible grilled cheese and love daughters he'd only known for 3 weeks with the kind of fierce devotion that took some people decades to learn. The wedding never happened, she said. Daniel smiled sadly. No, it didn't. But something more terrifying and beautiful did. What's that? Rachel stepped closer, closing the distance between them, and took his hand. We began. The words settled between them, not an ending, but a starting point. Not a happily ever after, but a willingness to try. Not perfection, but presence. Daniel pulled her closer, pressing his forehead against hers, both of them breathing the same air, occupying the same impossible space between past and future. "One day at a time," he whispered. "One day at a time," Rachel agreed. And for the first time in 5 years, neither of them was running. They were building, slowly, carefully, imperfectly, but together. And this is the truth about second chances: they don't arrive wrapped in silver paper with navy ribbons. They arrive in muddy playgrounds and crooked shelves and 7:30 a.m. doorbells. They look like a man learning to be a father from scratch. They look like a woman learning to trust again. They look like two little girls teaching both of them what family actually means. If this story moved you, hit that like button. If you believe in transformation, share it with someone who needs to see that people can change. If you've ever had to rebuild something you thought was broken forever, drop a comment below, because you're not alone in that fight. And if you want more stories about real love, messy families, and the courage it takes to begin again, subscribe. Because this community, we see you, we understand you, and we're here for every chapter of your story. The wedding never happened, but something better did. They began.